first like probably 5 months, I was still a student. I remember actually stepping out of classes to take sales calls. There's this one specific bench outside the econ building at BYU that I remember stepping out of my class because I saw a call coming in from the president of this bank, and going to sit on this bench and take a call for 15, 20 minutes to hash out pricing. If you went and told these conservative banks in Iowa, Nebraska, and whatever that they were being sold software by a student that was like 21 or whatever at the time, I don't know how they'd feel about it.
This is The Early Years, a show about influential early employees at the most successful companies and their stories that have made a lasting impact. I'm Braden Anderson, and on today's show, how our guest took a job with a company that is taking the mortgage industry by storm. But when he joined, they were essentially working out of a closet. If you've ever applied for a mortgage, then you know how complex and exhaustive the entire process can be. There are countless documents required, and keeping them all organized and accounted for is a pain. SimpleNexus is software that maintains everything you need for your mortgage application in one place. Primarily selling to banks and credit unions, they are helping make the complex mortgage process simple. Today we're joined by Jake Thompson, one of the earliest employees at SimpleNexus. Jake joined as employee number 9, and how their president put it, when the company was essentially working out of a closet. Jake was introduced to SimpleNexus by a friend and took a position knowing he wasn't going to get paid. But wanting to gain some real business experience during college, he viewed this as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, so I joined SimpleNexus beginning of 2016. Back when I started, I was the 9th employee. So it was super small operation. It was just kind of starting to hit that upward, trajectory of like super fast growth. So I heard of SimpleNexus from a friend of mine at BYU who had done an on-campus internship with them. And then he had really liked the founders, really liked the product. And he ended up sticking around as a part-time job while he was still in school. And so at the time, I was a student as well. And my schedule was that I only had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And my idea was that I could get a job that wasn't at a call center, wasn't in fast food anymore. I could get a real job. And so I started talking to him about coming in. And so originally they didn't have, any money to pay me. They didn't have a spot for me, but my friend was like, oh, he doesn't care. He'll just come in a couple of days a week and help out as an internship. And they were like, all right, well, if he doesn't mind not getting paid. And so that's how I got my foot in the door. And I'd come a couple times a week for a few months before the summer when I came on full time.
So you take this essentially an internship then. Like, why were you so willing to work for free at a company that had so few employees and you didn't know what was going to happen?
It was crazy. And honestly, it was really just getting some professional experience in my mind, working at especially like I've always known that startups and tech were super exciting and somewhere I could see myself in my career. So being able to get my foot in the door and get any experience, maybe meet some cool folks, maybe it would turn into something, you never know, was worth it for me. And I honestly, I treated it as part of my education. So like I said, was only doing school 2 days a week. There were 2 very full days a week, but only 2 days a week. So the other 3, I could, put some time into developing professionally. So that's really how I started. And then honestly, I just didn't want to work in call centers or anything like that anymore. I needed to get into a professional environment.
Yeah.
So
what did they have you start doing in this internship?
Yeah. And so it was one of those things where it was super unstructured. I came in and it was help out wherever was needed. We all wore tons of hats at the early days. And so it would be chipping in to help support team when they needed help. It would be doing research projects to see what industry groups would be worth joining and putting investment in. And one day it was sitting next to our president who told me, hey, I'm double booked for meetings right now, and I need you to hop on and demo our product to this user who's thinking about buying it. And I was like, Ben, like I really don't think I know what I'm doing enough for that. And he's like, well, it's fine. If you run into anything, just put it on mute, ask me, and then I'll get back to him. And if you blow it up, it's not the end of the world. It's just a single user deal. I'm like, all right, man, sounds good.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's how it started.
So let me get this right. So Ben is doing a lot of sales and he's just double booked. And so he says, hey, go jump on this call.
Yeah, Ben, our president, he seriously was like, "Hey, I'm gonna set my laptop here. I'll be doing my call over here. You do your call there, and literally just mute it and ask me if you run into anything, or tell me you'll follow up or something." I was
Okay.
like, "All right, man. Like, I don't know if this is the right thing, but hey, I'll jump in with both feet."
And had you done sales prior to this, or was this your first exposure?
First exposure to B2B sales for sure. Closest thing, I mean, doing sales, I worked at a call center, DirecTV, would do a little upselling there.
Okay.
I've been doing some sales my whole life. Back when I was, a kid, I owned a lawn maintenance company, and I was always trying to sell my services, get some commercial contracts, paid way better. But it was definitely my first real sales.
And how did it go? Did you close the deal?
Um, Probably not. It's like I always tell people this when we've had new hires or anything. If you're in an opportunity where you can get in there and blow stuff up, and it's not going to be the end of the world. It's a single user deal or whatever it might be. That's a great way to learn. And so that's exactly what I did to learn. Is you blow up a couple accounts, and
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And that was your path to sales. And I'm sure it's a great
Yep.
learning experience in that process.
It was. And so I still wasn't full sales at that point. We
Okay.
didn't have anyone that was full-time, solely focused on sales. But yep, I was doing some sales at that point. I was trying to do some upsell campaigns internally. In fact, this one time, my good buddy who got me the role in the first place, and we were trying to do an upsell campaign, and we had a list of customers that we had about 1,500 emails or something like that. There were people that were paying for our platform. They weren't on the maximum plan. They were paying for a smaller feature set. And so we wrote some emails, and we were super nervous. We didn't, hadn't done anything like this before. So we got a bunch of our email lists together. We didn't have, we were using Salesforce's like Essentials package at the time, which didn't have any automated email stuff. I think we had Survey or MailChimp or something
Mm.
that we didn't know how to use. And so we figured out you could do this in Google. And so we were trying to figure out in Google. And I just remember that our first email campaign, we totally messed up a placeholder, and it literally sent out hi first name to 1,000 people. And we were like, oh man, it was so embarrassing. And then we were like, it's okay. We sent a quick follow-up email that was like, hey, sorry about that. Like everything's being responded to.
Yeah.
And we actually had like great open rates and response rates, but it was super funny.
So the mistake turned out to be a good revenue producing opportunity.
Yeah, we made the most of it. And at the very least, it turned into a good story. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Um, well, tell me a little bit more what it was like in the early days of this company. They've grown quite a bit over the last, 5 to 10 years. So tell me a little bit more about what it was like working in the early days there.
yeah, the early days were crazy. I remember we used to take Ubers around to client meetings, even in our own city, because I was a college student with a beater car. The president and CEO didn't love their cars either. And so even, if the meeting was just a few blocks away, we would take an Uber to not show off our beater cars, but roll in with some style. And so I remember this one time we took one, it must have been like 3 or 4 blocks, but we didn't have enough time to walk. And our Uber driver was super confused why he was driving us just like 300 feet or something. But we thought it would be better to leave a good impression that way.
That's what you got to
So
do. I like it. And then I understand that you actually left the company for a few months. What was that about?
yes, I did. So in those early days, it was super fun, and I still was looking at it as a college job and really looking to get, early professional experience that was going to help make me qualified for a real career in, a bigger company or in management consulting or investment banking, something like that. And so I did. I left for the summer to take an internship in Chicago. So I went and I did my consulting thing for a few months. And while I left, I came back and they had moved offices from that small office up on the hill that we had jam packed with probably 20, 25 guys to a bigger real tech space in Thanksgiving Point with more like 40 to 50 employees. And I remember I walked in and I was on great terms. I told them I'd be leaving for a few months, then we could see where things were going when I came back. And when I came back, sure enough, I remember the first time I walked in, I saw double the people, all these folks I didn't know, these big vaulted ceilings and glass office space. And I was like, man, this is a real company right here. And sure enough, they had at that point over the summer while I was gone, started up the sales team. And so when I came back, they told me they'd love to have me on the sales team, or I could look at an entry role in marketing or a few other things. And I decided that sales was the best fit for my passion, what I care about, and what I was looking to do. And so even that when I took that first job, I still was not totally sure if I was going to go back to consulting, if I was going to do something else. And ultimately, after trying it for a few months as a student, decided that, a tech startup was the best place for me to start my career, really get awesome experience, be able to have real impact, and develop the skills that I actually care about rather than, just working on PowerPoint decks or doing some other entry level stuff.
Interesting. So yeah, I love that answer. And I'm just curious, you have this great opportunity to do management consulting. It's everyone's dream, right? Or it appears to be everyone's dream. Why do you leave that for this? I guess, how big was the company at that point? Was it still 10 individuals, or how big was it when you came back?
So I think when I came back, we were like 40, 45. And over the 3 or 4 months before I graduated, we were probably like 55 or so. It was growing at such a rapid pace.
So from the time you left, it grew 30 to 40 individuals, or 4x just in that short time period.
Yeah, it was crazy. It probably doubled while I was gone over the summer, and then during from when I came back, say September 1st or so, through the end of the year, we probably added another, went from 40 to 60 people. So wow. It was growing at such a rapid pace. That really sucked me in. I was like, man, this is somewhere that I could really have an impact and get in early enough to where I could really grow my skills and my influence better than just being another cog in a giant machine.
Yeah.
Which is, there's a lot of great things to be said about starting your career in consulting or anywhere else that has a very defined track. But I honestly just didn't think that was for me. I've always been more focused on startups and entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And why sales? You decided to go back to sales. What really led to that decision?
Yeah, sales, man, it's in my blood. My dad started his career in tech sales. It's always been somewhere where I feel like you can control your own destiny and be a big part of your success. I've learned that there are a lot of amazing things and a lot of struggles that salespeople share, and that's just how it goes, and that's great. But sales was definitely somewhere where I felt like I could gain the skills I needed that are gonna be, vastly important throughout my career. Negotiating, being driven to bring business in the door and meet with people face to face, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So when you come back, so are you still in school when you do sales?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, it's crazy. And some of these companies, if you went and told these conservative banks in Iowa, Nebraska, and whatever, that they were being sold software by a student that was 21 or whatever at the time, I don't know how they'd feel about it, but I'm sure they're happy now because they've been loving our software. But yeah, I was. So those first probably 5 months, I was still a student. I remember actually stepping out of classes to take sales calls, and I would try to schedule all my demos on those days when I didn't have classes. And it was crazy. I don't think many people are working deals that are, 25 to 50,000 monthly recurring revenue, or annual recurring revenue, excuse me, as a student. So it was an awesome experience.
So wait, did I hear that right? You are leaving your class to go negotiate sales deals.
Yeah. I remember there's this one specific bench outside the econ building at BYU that I remember stepping out of my class because I saw a call coming in from the president of this bank, and going to sit on this bench and take a call for 15, 20 minutes to hash out pricing. And I remember them because I've still owned that account for years and they still use our software. And so it's super funny to think about that I absolutely was stepping out of class to talk to this guy that, try to convince him why he should trust us with, $30,000-$40,000 every year and sign a multi-year agreement with us. So yeah,
Wow.
it's crazy to think about now.
So that's nuts. You got to love the hustle. Did these people know, like you kind of alluded to this, but did they know that, the person that was selling to them was this young kid, or was that an issue?
I don't know if I'd say it was an issue, but it's definitely something that would come up, especially, mortgage industry, it's a little stodgy. It's a little old school for the most part. And so I definitely would get questions about, so how long you've been in the industry, or what was your experience like before SimpleNexus? And really, it was so important for me. And I had an early boss and mentor who really pounded in that, the first thing a prospect evaluates is their salesperson.
Mm.
Then they evaluate the company. Then they evaluate your product. So you got to be super strong and sell yourself as a resource and an expert, even if, you're young, you don't have a ton of experience, whatever it might be. And so he helped me hone in my story on my value. And that was, hey, I might sound like I'm 15 or whatever on this phone call, but I was the 9th employee at this company. I've trained people on our software. I've helped in implementation. I've helped with, customer success. Like I'm an expert on what we do. And so I absolutely have value, even though I'm, this young kid doesn't have a college degree yet.
So do you feel like that affected the outcome of your deals? Like you're this young kid, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
working on these really big, important sales deals. Do you feel like you lost deals at times, or were you able to convince these people that you were valuable enough to their organization and what you were selling was valuable enough to their organization?
Yeah, I think it did not hurt me. And honestly, a great thing about our industry is we're primarily selling to salespeople, selling to
Mm.
mortgage people who are selling mortgages. And so at their heart, I think they all love the hustle. And so being like, oh yeah, I'm the young guy or whatever. But one, I'm willing to bring in experts. Like our organization is chock full of experts. And I'll bring people in if we need someone to talk the talk on, mortgage compliance or whatever it might be. But two, selling it as like, look, like I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure you have a good experience, and I care about you, and I'm an expert. That I think people really liked that. And if I lost any deals because of my inexperience, it was because I wasn't a very good salesman yet. It wasn't because and I hadn't learned enough yet. It wasn't because they judged me poorly.
Yeah.
Nothing like.
Gotcha. So you're going to school, and in sales, there's typically a lot of travel. How did you manage that during your school years?
Yeah, and it was pretty crazy because I did go to a couple conferences while I was still in school. We were smaller, so we weren't doing as much in-person sales as we do today. But yeah, I remember our first conference. My president of the company told me that he needed someone to come with him next week to this conference in Vegas. And I was like, man, I am here for it. Like, let's go, get it. And I was always willing to hustle and make it work. And I think I rescheduled a test or something at school, and I went out to Vegas with him. And it was crazy because we had scheduled this conference, or at least me to go to this conference, only a week in advance. And so the hotel was completely booked up. And I was like, man, I could stay at a different place, but I'm going to be my first conference trying to figure out like Ubers and getting across, the city and all this crazy stuff. And he's like, oh no, just come on. Well, I'll make sure they get me double queens and you stay in my room. And so we did. We shared a room at our first conference. So that was my, my first time jumping in.
How was that? Was that awkward? Like, I know it's a small company, but it's still the president of the company.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. It was a little different than anything I had done before, but he's an awesome guy. We got along great. We had a good time, and it was nothing but nonstop learning for me. Especially, I learned that traveling for work is not always fun. You're going to Vegas for work. You're thinking you'll have some fun, but it's conference time from 7 a.m. to after parties and everything at 11 p.m. midnight, and it's a lot of fun, but it takes a lot out of you. So we'd go back to back to the hotel room and crash, get up and do it again. So No, not weird, just a little different than anything I had done before.
Yeah. So speaking of
Yes.
conferences, you told me a story once about you having to fly out last minute to San Antonio for a conference. What was that about?
Yeah, this was crazy, but I in my, one thing about being on a small team is you got to be nimble. You got to be ready to jump in with both feet and drink from the fire hydrant. And so one time our chief revenue officer called me into his office and he said, Jake, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, well, I've got, a demo and I've got some calls scheduled, whatever. He's like, no. You got to move all of that. I'm like, okay. He's like, because I completely forgot about a speaking engagement that I'm supposed to have at a credit union conference in San Antonio. So I'm not gonna be able to make it. So you got to go for me, Jake. And I was like, all right, man. Like this is crazy. I'll do it. And so it really was like, I sat down, I spent the rest of the day working on my slides and working with him to get everything in. They needed my bio, and I'm like, I don't have a bio. I don't have headshots. Like I don't have this. So I was figuring it all out. Sent him my LinkedIn picture or whatever.
Yeah.
And I got on a plane that very same night to fly out to San Antonio. My flight was delayed, so I landed at like 1:00 in the morning. I forgot my belt at home, so I had to go to Walmart and buy a belt. Like I was speaking at this conference at 9:30 in the morning, and I got there, and it was like me, our biggest competitor, a bunch of industry veterans. I'm like, all right, like I'm just gonna do it and do my best. And sure enough, as soon as I got up there, I like gave my presentation. I sat on a panel with all these guys that had 15, 20 years of experience in the industry. And went great. You don't get that kind of experience at many companies, post-grad within a year or so of graduating.
And I'm curious, being at such a small company, you have a lot of exposure to, again, the president, probably the founders and a lot of these other individuals. How have those relationships developed and has that been valuable for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that was one of the biggest reasons for me to come to SimpleNexus to begin my post-graduation career versus going to, a bigger tech company or going into consulting, was the really being able to sit down with people that are doing exactly what I want to do with my career later. Like I would love to run a company. I want to be in a position to be an entrepreneur and have the impact like they do. And so being able to, even to this day, text them on their cell, call them up, go to their houses for a pool party or whatever it might be, and just be completely candid about, what I need and what I'm looking to add to my skill set, what I should be doing, has been totally invaluable. And it's something that I think is sometimes undervalued by folks that are coming out of college that want to, get into some high-powered career, is that when you start at a small company, it may not have the same name recognition, but your impact can be huge, and your influence and the amount you're able to learn from experts or mentors is really immense. And so that's something that I highly value to this day.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about where SimpleNexus is now and what you're doing at SimpleNexus now.
Yeah, so we're about 130 employees now or so. My role has grown. So when I first started sales, I was taken west of the Mississippi. We had two sales reps. One took east, one took west. Our VP and our one BDR. And so I really started with the small companies. If it was a big demo, I would make sure to have a VP on with me or something like that, or the president or somebody. And then it's just one of those things where you keep getting more specialized. I did some mid-market sales. In the last year and a half, I've been focused on enterprise, so companies of all sizes and up to some of the biggest banks and different things that you would know. But yeah, I'm a territory sales rep, so I cover Pacific Northwest, the Rocky Mountains, a bit of the Midwest, and it's a lot of traditionally outside of crazy COVID-19 times, a lot of in-person meetings, a lot of conferences. Doing whatever it takes to get these deals start to finish.
In your eyes, what has SimpleNexus done right early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many things that really, are going to take a company from, 10 employees to 130 and growing tremendously. I'd say the company has focused really itself on the customer. So our CEO, loves to say that we love our customer, not our product. And it's not to say that we don't love our product and what it does, but the goal is not to build the best product. The goal is to solve the problem for the customer, and the product is how we do that. So it's really focused on, not being the shiniest object or the company that invests the most in marketing to try to, get people, and then we'll figure out the product later. But it's always been do it right, do, what our people care about, and be authentic. And that's something that, I personally really believe in. And it's one of those things where I talk to folks that maybe aren't in sales that have told me, like, oh, I don't think I could do sales. Something like cold calling people all day or trying to convince people to do something they don't want to all day would be terrible. And I'm always like, I agree, man. Like if I was selling something that I didn't believe in, like trying to trick people all day, that sounds like hell.
Yeah.
So being able to be in it somewhere where it's like, we're selling something that is legitimately helping people grow their businesses and help them, I think is the mantra that has been deep in our company's bones. And it's really gone a long way for helping SimpleNexus.
Yeah.
We've also been very conservative on, growing, absolutely. And we've, been on the Inc. 500 or Inc. 5000, fastest growing, Fast 500, all this kind of stuff. And that's awesome, but doing so in a way that's sustainable, and it's not over leveraging the company. It's not putting us at risk to lose out, has paid dividends, especially when we start seeing, the market contract, as things get crazy right now with coronavirus or whatever it might have been. They look very smart right now. So
yeah,
that's something. Those are two things I think they've done well.
Coming up, Jake shares his advice for those that are in the early years. But first, scenes from an upcoming interview.
Rags had shortly before that gone on Shark Tank. And so there were some kind of interesting, compelling things going with the company. Came a point where she's like, hey, I am going to fill this role. So we've been talking about this role for a long time, for like 18 months. But she's like, hey, I'm actually ready to pull the trigger now. So we need to decide if you're interested or not. She's like, hey, we're gonna offer you the COO role. And at this point, I struggled with it because I liked tech, I liked Lucid, but and so I thought about it for a long time. I actually had several discussions. Is this a bad move for my career? Am I closing the door on working in the tech space if I do this? And there was a lot of debate going back and forth of, is this a good move for me? I think we ultimately concluded, hey, there is some risk that if you do take this role, you might not be able to work in the tech space again.
As we kind of wrap up here, Jake, I think a question I'd love to ask is, what piece of advice would you give to someone that's currently in the early years of a startup?
Yeah, I would say always look for where you can have the most impact and think about where you're growing your skills. So I saw early on that while I really, honestly, I enjoyed training folks on our platform and owning companies from like a customer success standpoint, those were very good things to do, but it wasn't where I saw myself having an impact. And it wasn't where I saw myself growing my skills in the way that I personally wanted to grow them and to meet my goals later in my career. So I, pivoted onto the sales team and really focused there. And that's been where, I've seen that there's nothing that gets the company pumped more than closing a big deal, whether you're a developer or product or marketing or anybody. Everyone's in there, pounding the chest and excited. And I love that, having that impact. And it's put me in a position where I feel like I'm gaining skills that are going to be invaluable later on. So I would say look for those opportunities. Don't be afraid to really get your hands dirty and learn by doing. Trial by fire that's the name of the game in early stage startups, where you're going to be outside your comfort zone. But once you do something that's outside your comfort zone a couple times, suddenly your comfort zone is moved. So
yeah.
It's one of those things that, you can't be scared to do something that you're not ready for, but you got to be ready to own it and do your best and get better every time you do it.
That's Jake Thompson, one of the earliest employees at SimpleNexus. Thanks for listening to today's show. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast fill, and if you know someone that you think we should interview, email me at bradenta@gmail.com. I'm Braden Anderson, and this is The Early Years.